really happy and honestly humbled. You know, there's lots of not very fun parts of running a business, but by far the best part of my job is I get to meet farms like you guys are going to meet tonight. So it's Darwin Gork from Plumas. Darwin and I have spent hours and hours and hours on the phone. I love that picture of him because you're going to see what he looks like coming up real soon, and it's exciting. Sam Otto is a grain farm from Thalberg. Hopefully I'm saying that right, but I'm sure Sam can correct me when he comes on. And Peter Penner from Winkler did a really, really neat trial that I think has a lot of grounds in the future, which is land swapping with a potato farm and grazing full season cover crops. I should say, if you weren't on about 5 minutes ago, Peter is calving cows right now, and I think just had his first calf, and he's grabbing a sleigh and tugging the calf in. So we might have to do some funny arrangements here tonight as far as who goes in what order. But anyway, it'll be a great panel. Again, questions go in the Q&A and not the chat. Q&A, not the chat. Get them in early. I have Trav to my right here. You cannot see him, but he's going to filter through some of the questions. So if we get double up questions, yeah, we can kind of try and kill a few birds with one stone. So anyway, let's get into it. I'm just going to do a quick 10 minutes about because the full season cover crop or full season cover crops in general, whether it's ours or you're making your own or our competitors. I just want to run through the concept because it's a new enough idea. And I think it's important to understand why plant diversity, soil health, and functioning soil is so important, both for cattle farms, but also for everyone, grain farms, society, you name it. So I start every presentation I have ever done with this graph. Why? First off, this is from Darren Coleman. If you haven't read his book, Civilization Critical, I highly recommend you go out and buy it. Excellent piece of literature. But when we're talking about cover crops, we're actually talking about a systems change. And why is that so important? It is because the current system of which we are producing commodities under is broken. So this graph shows 100 years of Canadian farm data from Statistics Canada. The blue line is farm productivity, and the green line is net farm income. So we have done a really excellent job over the past 100 years at producing, just like we were told to, add more inputs, add the fungicide, creep feed the calves, go bigger, 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 produce more, and trust me, you'll get paid out at the end. Well, now we have 100 years of data saying that's not true. And this graph, sadly, is at the expense of both our topsoil and our rural communities. I always stop when I pick out somebody in the crowd and I say, a young farmer, and I say, does this get you excited about farming? Is this what you want your future to be? Putting, for every dollar you put in, getting 2-cent return on your dollar? You might as well go sell cars or do something else, because it is a risky game and it doesn't seem to be getting any better based on the current system. And then, like I said, I travel all over Western Canada giving this presentation. I always start with this, and I did the craziest, most dumb, financial, risky thing any young farm can do. I'm getting married. Hopefully you're laughing behind the camera because my fiance is sitting right here, and she is. It's the only reason I could get away with that. But I love her very much, and if you've spent more than 5 minutes with me, you'd understand this would be very, very exhausting to live with. So I'm a very, very lucky man. So to get into the actual concept of cover crops and plant diversity, so we're just touching on the 5 principles of soil health. I'm sure most people that are on here have seen these before, but we're going to focus on one, which is plant diversity. But just to touch on them quick, it's a living root in the ground for as many months as possible. Animal integration on any acre that we can get animals on. Minimal soil disturbance, so that's both physical, cultivation and tillage, and chemicals, so fertilizers, or chemicals and fertilizers. Keeping the soil armored, what we say is the first step to building soil is to stop losing it. So keep it covered, protected from wind and water erosion. And like I said, what we're going to talk about mostly today, the focus on is plant diversity, the importance of plant diversity and how it can actually work in your system. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this graphic here, but it sums up the difference between monocrop production and a system more in tune with Mother Nature. So on the left, those plants have the exact same identical life cycle. They capture photosynthetic energy. They stimulate biology just like every plant does. But the issue is those plants are stimulating the same biology. They're rooting in the same root zone. They're growing the same height, capturing the same sunlight. They hit reproduction at the exact same time. Well, that system needs to be fertilized because we're not, or add synthetics to it because we are not stimulating the biology and enough diverse biology to keep that system fed and keep that soil functional. So on the right, that is a system designed by Mother Nature, which is plant diversity, different plant architecture, different root architecture, but most importantly, different species of plants that capture photosynthetic energy, release a portion of that energy into the soil, stimulating a diverse subset of biology. That biology then creates stable soil aggregates, and we have a functioning soil. And when we have a functioning soil, the biology, which is responsible in nature for gathering those minerals, that biology can gather the minerals. They have a home, they have air and pore space, water can infiltrate, and we become either less or totally eliminate our dependency on synthetic inputs. So that's a really, really quick overview of what's going on. So like I touched on about a root exodus, just back here, again, each one of these plants, every single plant on planet Earth gathers a certain percentage of photosynthetic energy, and when it's in vegetation, releases a portion of that energy into the soil. It feeds the biology, and the biology in turn feeds the plant. So what we do when we have different plants at different stages of their life cycle, we keep that flow of energy in the soil. Very diverse root exodus, stimulating diverse biology that accesses the minerals that plants in this system need. So that's just a really quick overview of how plant diversity works and how we can use plant diversity to start reducing risk on the farm and reducing inputs. So this is an example actually of Peter, who is currently dealing with winter calving issues. But this is a picture of Peter's full season cover crop, and you can see this is my business partner Trav, who pulled out about 5 plants together, and you can see those balls of soil that are hanging off those roots. And that is an example of soil aggregates, stable soil aggregates that form around roots. They're formed by biology, and they create pore space in the soil. And when we have pore space in the soil, water can infiltrate, air can infiltrate, the biology has access to minerals, and we have a functioning soil that is not dependent on synthetics. So that is a very beautiful picture of some wonderful roots and some well aggregated soil. So when we're feeding the biology, again, I know this is a little bit like drinking water out of a fire hose, but we're going to put some real world examples to some of these concepts. When we're talking C to N, all we're talking about is a balanced ration. So when we feed a cow or a human being, we want a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of protein. Well, what we refer to that in the soil is carbon, energy, nitrogen, protein. So what we want is to balance that high carbon plants with low carbon, high nitrogen, digestible, lots of digestible protein plants. And what it does is it makes an ideal microbial diet that both cycles minerals, but can keep soil stable and access to more minerals, and again, less dependent on synthetics. So this is an example of my cover crop this year that we grazed. So on the left, that's my dog Rusty at the worst of the worst drought. And on the right, that is my dog Rusty in the exact same field, just a stone throw away 6 days later. And the difference in these two pictures was about 8 tenths of rain. So why is that? Why do we see this response? And really everyone on here knows it's because a plant isn't really made up of nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium. A plant is 96% carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. What are those things? Carbon, sunlight, oxygen, hydrogen, H2O, water. So if we can start to maximize our carbon intake with different plants, stimulating different biology, keeping that flow of energy into the soil, and maximizing our water usage by having stable soil aggregates. So we can not only infiltrate water, but we can hold water for later use. The rest of that 4% seems to take care of itself. But If we're talking about the remaining 4%, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, down the list, we don't hear a lot about this in agriculture, which is total nutrient extraction. We see soil tests with soluble nutrients available to the plant on that day when we soil tested in fall. But for real, these minerals exist in the soil. This is 49 farms, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, North Dakota. The General Mills program took soil tests on all this land, my farm being one of them. And this is the total nutrients that they came up with, per acre. So there's lots of minerals there. We just need to stimulate the catalysts that are responsible for taking these tied up minerals in the soil and getting them to our plant. And that is biology. So Sam, if you want to unmute yourself, we'll kind of get into the panelist. I know some of that was, I rushed through really quick, but again, if there's questions, I see questions in the chat, which is an absolute no-no. I'm not going to read those. Yes, in the Q&A, thank you very much. Whoever just put that in there. So Sam has called me up, I think last winter sometime. You just read Gabe Brown book, and I'm pretty sure the first time we chatted, we had about a 2-hour conversation, and Sam and I have had several since. I'm very thankful he's on the panel today. Sam is a straight grain farm that wants to implement plant diversity. So Sam, I'm getting, my producer is telling me you got to turn your video on. But if you come on, tell us about your family, tell us about your farm, and we'll talk a little bit about your full season cover crop. So take her away, Sam.
Yeah. It's Thalberg, by the way, but that's fine.
Thalberg.
Yeah.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, so we're just strictly a grain farm. That's my little family there, little operators in training, standing in our highly profitable canola crop.
Wink.
Yeah, and we, yeah, like you said, I read Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil book, and that changed everything. Like, we were just a straight conventional grain farm up until a year ago. And then we got on board with this, well, regenerative ag, and we just want to.
Yes, Sam, start with what I start every conversation with when someone calls me was, what are your goals? What were you wanting to achieve with the full season cover crop?
Well, I guess we're just trying to address like soil health issues and like trying to get plant diversity and maybe deal with compaction issues that we have in the fields, and just, I don't know, kind of a lack of life in the fields. And also kind of a big thing, which has become very important in the last couple of years, obviously, is water infiltration. Like, we were having rains and it all pools on the top and runs off, and like half an inch only. And that should go into the ground. That shouldn't run off your fields. So yeah, we were, doing heavy deep tilling and all the fungicide and all the seed treatment and all, you name it, high inputs. So just trying to, I don't know, goal to change the future, I guess.
That's really good. So Sam, just before we get into it, have you done any water infiltrations? Like, do you know what your soil is infiltrating at?
No, just visually. Haven't actually done the water infiltration test. It's something I'd like to get into.
Yeah, all good. We'll touch on it a bit in the question time. We can talk about some of the water infiltration. There's going to be a lot of interest from watersheds and whatnot, and they've asked me, what's the best test that we can do? How can we show that these cover crops are actually working? And I always say it's a really hard thing to show on a soil test. The amount of biology and chemistry changes that are constantly happening, but a water infiltration tells you so much information, and it's something we can all agree on. Hey, we want our water infiltrating and storing and not running off with our topsoil. So, sorry, Sam, tell me about your drill.
We have a Borgo Paralink, which is just like it's a hoe drill that can move up and down a little bit. It's nothing fancy about it. 10-inch spacing. And I skip over to the next one actually.
You got it.
So you can kind of see the job that it did. And like, so yeah, we seeded our full season cover on May 8th. So probably fairly early for a full season cover, just because things were going pretty smoothly in seeding. And I think I seeded a little bit too light, and also we had zero rain. This picture is on June 10th, I believe, and you can see the ground is wet. That's one of the first rains that field got. So I remember around this time thinking like, the other fields are looking a lot better than this one.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I assume you want this one?
Sure. So, I mean, the picture on the left there, you can kind of tell like what the ground looks like. The field that we seed into is very sandy, kind of hard, very hard when it gets dry. Compacted, I'd say. And the difference between that picture and then the rain gauge is quite a ways. I believe that rain gauge is from like the middle of August,
Yep.
when it actually had rain. So yeah, we grew that full season cover just hoping one of the local cattle guys would want it, and turns out they wanted it.
I'm positive of that.
Yeah. And so they took their first. Do you want any?
You got it. So what's the date we're looking at here, Sam?
Like it was not. Well, that's after that rain. So that is like what I'd hoped it would look like. But I guess that is the advantage of having all those plants. Like at first the cereals were very good and the peas, but not everything grew right off the bat. And I think lots of it germinated 5 weeks after it was seeded, because there was not the kind of plant diversity off the bat. But then after we had that rain, and this is after a cut of hay came off of here.
Oh, so this is regrowth.
This is regrowth.
Wow.
So first cut of hay came off, and just shy of 2,000 pounds an acre of dry hay, which is like, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure that this is well, and I mean the hay is just like a bonus. Like we really just wanted to try to put a field into a diverse cover crop to get the soil health benefits. And then, after a bit of rain, boom, like this is what it can look like. And the guy who cut the hay said that like he can see this being highly productive. Like, and he said if he had to, he would just wrap the bales, because he said he might not be able to deal with too much at once like that.
So what was the second cut like, Sam?
Surprisingly, well, I guess the second cut, like this is the end of, oh wait, when is this? That picture's from September 8th. So it's starting to get later into the season already. So I think it was cut like a couple days after this picture. And the second cut, what did we have off there? 1,500 pounds an acre of dry hay.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it came out to almost 3,500 pounds of dry hay off there. And after it was cut the second time, it was still green. So it was green right up until the snow flew this year. So yeah.
Sam, you and I have chatted about this on the phone, discussing about options for next year. And honestly, this was one of my questions for the Q&A, but I see we've lost Peter again. So I'm assuming he's got calving issues. So what's your plan for this crop for this year?
My plan is to just see what overwintered, because the hairy vetch in there was, and not sure how much fall rye ended up growing in there, but definitely there's a crop of vetch, if not maybe ryegrass. So my options are to leave it and see what kind of cash crop I can take off of it without doing anything. And I forgot to mention, like, this field had no fertilizer, no nothing. Like, I seeded it and I forgot about it and went camping while the guy made the hay.
That's the best way to make dry hay.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I mean, I was considering getting a hay bine and making hay myself.
No, you don't want to do
that. just because I mean, I would say I took canola out of rotation in order to do a full season cover, because I just, hate is a strong word, but I strongly dislike canola.
Monocrop canola.
Monocrop canola.
Yes.
So yeah, like this hay, the actual value of the hay was quite a bit more than what my canola was this year.
Nice. Well, we're going to come back to the Q&A, Sam. I actually had a guy call me this morning. Again, I was telling off the hop that I don't have any seed booked. I don't have any fertilizer booked. I don't have any herbicide booked, but I had a farm give me a really cool idea about what to do, how I could implement full season cover crops this year when inputs are so crazy. So we're going to get to it. So I think the next one's Peter. Great job, Sam. You did excellent. Stick around for Q&A. So Peter, if you want to unmute yourself and get your video up. So Peter partnered with Hespler Farms just south of Winkler. They were transitioning some land to organic sweet potato production. And to be honest, the first time I met Peter, it was actually through his son. He's the agronomist at the farm. And they were very, very interested in sending updating photos. And yeah, it was just really neat to see. I think there's so much potential in the future, instead of, trying to force cattle onto grain farms. Instead, let's just share our resources, and the grain farms can partner with a cattle farm to improve their land, and the cattle farm gets some cheap biomass to graze their cattle. So I wanted to have Peter on to tell his story, because I really do. I think there's huge potential in this in the future. So Pete, how's the calf? You got a first live calf?
Everything's good. It's in the barn. The ears were good, so we're good to go.
Nice. Well, tell us about your family and your farm, and just give me a heads up when you want me to change slides.
Okay. I'm Peter, and myself and my wife Edna, we operate a cow-calf backgrounding operation in the Winkler area, and our son and daughter-in-law live just down the road from us. And like you said, Derek is the agronomist at Hespler Farms, and our daughter and her husband live in the city, and our daughter is a dietitian. So it's where food comes from, right?
We are what we eat, and what we eat comes from the soil, Peter.
So next slide.
You got it. We might have a little bit of a delay here, Peter.
Okay. So this picture here is one that my son took. We seeded the field full season cover. I believe the date was April 28th or 29th, somewhere in there. And that picture is taken about day 11 or 12 after seeding. The first one with the emergence there, and the other ones, the first one is before the rain, and the other one is after the rain. We did have 6/10 of rain the third week in May, and then we had another 7/10 first week in June. I guess that was a couple of days before you came out there, and that's all the rain we've seen till August.
Peter, just talk about what conditions were like at seeding time. I know I was talking with Derek before they seeded, and it was horrendously dry. So we don't usually recommend, because there's warm season species in the full season. We don't usually recommend it going in that early, but conditions were just so dry where you were at that they wanted to get her in.
Well, we did have, like, I believe it was, when I think back, we had either 2/10 of rain or we had a little bit of a snow shower, but it was equivalent of 2/10 of rain. And as soon as it dried up, they went in there with a single disc drill and drilled it in really shallow. And we got good germination. Like it came out of the ground pretty quick, but it just kind of sat there and didn't do anything because we didn't have any moisture. And then when the rain came, it took off after that.
Cool. Well, let's talk about your grazing plan.
Well, we had a 26-acre field here, and my son, he divided it up into 9 paddocks. They were just under 3 acres each. And we started off, I remember you were up there, I think it was like June 9th or something. And we kind of, like, it was going pretty good after the rain. And then we kind of asked you, like, so when should we put heifers out here? And I remember you saying 2 days ago. After the rain came, it just took off on us. And so we put the heifers in June 12th, and we 34 heifers in a bull, and we were getting 3 days per paddock. And once we got about 3/4 way done, we were getting 4 days. And then the last 2, because of the growth, if you see on some of the other pictures, like, they were like belly deep in grass. So we were getting up to 5 days on the last.
Yeah, this was actually a field day that we had. I don't know, would there have been 25 farms there? But the heifers were very well cooperative. They were running around us. But the neat thing I find with this picture is, look at the grass where the machinery's sitting. Like, this is mid-June and it was burnt off. And the cover crop was, well, I think, yeah, here we've got some grazing pictures here. This was about the same time, Peter. But if you just want to talk about the moving, and I'll ask you a question, Peter, because it's the same question I get about grazing full season cover crop, which, isn't it just a pain in the ass to be moving a wire every 2 days?
Actually, it being as dry as it was this summer, and there was no hay to cut or anything, it was almost like it was a stress reliever to go out there every 3 days and just rip down the field with the quad and have grass whipping off the top of your rack, and turning around and coming back the same way, pulling a wire and stepping posts in. Doesn't take very long at all.
Well, and I have the same experience too, where I'm like, it seems like a pain in the ass in your head in the wintertime, but when you actually go out and do it, there's something therapeutic about rolling wire and watching cows graze. I find myself, once the wire's out, I'll just sit there for a half an hour, 40 minutes, and just watch what plants they want to eat, watch them roam around, check the borders. And your heifers did the same thing my heifers do on full season cover crop.
We had, I had my niece helping me move. We'd always move in the evenings when it was cooler, and she would run the quad, and we just clip the reel on the back of the rear rack, and she would just drive slow, and I would just run after and just step posts in, these ring top posts, and it didn't take you very long. And we usually had like 1,600 foot runs. And it almost seemed like when you'd come, they were waiting to, they'd come. We had a bit of a hub set up, or a central corral with a water trough in there. And it seemed like it didn't take them very long to figure it out when they were out. They all come in there, and you close the gate and open another gate, and out they go again.
Yeah, and Peter, you and I had a conversation. Again, this is going to come back to an idea I had we can touch on in the Q&A section, but these were heifers that you were running on here. Whether I think there were 30, but
34.
34, right? And just talk about what you saw as far as rate of gain. And then I'm going to come back and talk about this, use your number for rate of gain. But I know, like, we were there about this time and they were tough to find a better looking group of animals.
Well, we should have scaled them going in. We never did, but we did scale them going out because I kind of had pulled some heifers out of there before we went to pasture and sold them at the auction mart. So I kind of know what the weight was on most of them, like just a ballpark, and they came out of there at like 1275. So they did. The rate gain was unbelievable this summer, and for this coming summer, we will scale everything going in and coming out.
Good stuff. This is just a nice picture. I had this on my phone. I was withholding this from you, but this is the day we were there for the field day, and the heifers coming through. Gives you a good idea of how tall, like how thick and lush that crop was.
And I guess when we were grazing, it kind of got ahead of us at the tail end there, and we found a lot of the crop had kind of, it wasn't like mature, but it was mature enough that if they trampled it, it'd go to seed.
Yep.
And so when we were grazing, they did trample quite a bit. And once the rain started in the beginning of August, when we came back, it was like thicker than ever.
Yeah, we've got some pictures here. Peter, I was asked at a farm tour, and I'm sorry I'm springing this on you because we've had lots of long conversations on the phone, but why don't you talk about, and I can talk about mine as well when we get into the questions, but because you and I do virtually the same thing, which is graze our heifers on full season cover crop. I do it on my farm because I like the way heifers graze. They're always kind of in a tight bunch, and we can get that good animal impact on the soil. But talk about what conception rates were like for you on these heifers.
Well, out of 34 heifers, we had 5 heifers that came back open, but all 5 of them, we had implanted embryos in them. And I know during the summer, probably about August or so, we did lose 2 embryos that I noticed on pasture. So that's the thing. But anything that was bred, bull bred, they were all, it was the 5 that were open were all ones that we had implanted. So you don't know when, if they lost their embryos on pasture, but I know we did lose 2.
And I've got my story is very similar. Our conception rates on the full season this year they were somewhere between 93 and 94%. So it's really tough to get better than that. And we had 90% catch in the first cycle, which we have never experienced anything like that. And I don't know if I can give all the credit to the full season or if it was the year or what it was, but we've had some farms ask the question about increased protein during breeding season, if that's a risk or an issue as far as breeding. And I mean, we sure haven't run into it, and I didn't know your answer to that. I'm glad you had really good luck. But yeah, it's just being totally honest. We've had some farms say, increased protein at breeding season isn't necessarily a good thing. And we got a good cattle guy coming on next. I'm sure Darwin's got lots to say on the topic as well. So we'll keep rolling.
And the picture, the greener picture there on the left, that is a second time regrowth, and that would have been probably in like September, beginning of September on that field on where that picture was taken.
When did you pull the heifers off, Peter? Like how long did they graze for?
We went from June 12th till November 1st.
Oh,
and
wow.
Kind of in the summer there, we had them. I didn't know, how You know, were they lacking? And I did take one bale down there just to kind of like thinking, but the bale basically sat there. They never touched it. So they weren't really hungry.
No. Peter, we'll just touch on it quick because the questions are sure filling up. Just you did some dry hay trials, and it's a question we always get. Can we do it for dry hay? And I always say I do it for dry hay because we bale graze in the wintertime, but people would say, hey, you're biased. You own the company. But just talk about, you did some dry hay, what your experience was like and what the crop was like.
Yes, this picture here was, we had done a 25-acre trial on, figured we would try making some, we were going to do bale silage, but we figured, you know, it's not raining, and why spend the money on wrap if you can get it dry? And so we cut it, and I raked it a couple of days later. I put two together, and it didn't take long, and it was dry. And this field here was 25 acres, and we ran 3 bales to the acre. And I had, when I did a crop insurance claim, they were out with the scale, so I set a couple of these bales down on the scale, and they were 1,900 pounds a piece.
So almost 6,000 pounds an acre, or 5,700 pounds.
And we didn't get,
you buggers with clay in your soil. That's a bumper crop for us.
and we tried going for a second cut, and this was potatoes last year, and there wasn't a lot of stuff in the soil, and we just figured the second cut, I don't know, there might have been, well, it didn't rain, so I just took the disc to it and thought, you know what, put it back in the ground and it'll be there next year.
For sure. And this is a picture of, I assume this was the corral you were just walking around in.
Yes.
So is that heifers that are grazing, or that's the dry hay and the bale feeder? Those are
yes,
heifers?
those are the heifers that were out grazing all summer on the cover crop. So the plan is for this year is we're going to grow just over 100 acres of cover crop for hay this year.
Nice. All right. Well, Peter, the questions came rolling in there. Thank you very much. We're going to come back and everyone's going to unmute and take their camera off. Darwin, don't you dare turn your camera on yet. So this is Darwin Gork. I was very blessed to have met Darwin. He gave me a call, Plumas. He's from the Plumas area, and it was horrendous dry this year. And it was horrendous dry at home too. And misery loves company, as they say. So Darwin and I would have long conversations. And then we went up to a field day up there. It was the start of July, maybe the middle of July. And I met this guy, Darwin Gork. And then we've since had several long conversations on the phone, chatting about literally everything, cows, crop, life, you name it. But then before the webinar here tonight, Darwin came on the webinar and, okay, Darwin, let's show everyone your new look. What? Did your wife make you do that, or did you do that? I want to party with this guy here.
That was my COVID beard joke.
Well, to people that are always on the webinar, I had hair down to here and a mustache this time last year. So I guess we're both clean shaven this year, Darwin.
There you go.
Do you in 22. So tell us about your farm, your cattle operation. Darwin, I know you're probably the most educated cattle producer that I have had the pleasure of knowing. So we're going to get into all this stuff, but tell us about your farm, and we'll get into your experience with cover cropping.
Okay. Myself and my wife Lori, we got 2 kids, Lisa and Connor. They're both off in university right now. And I farm with my brother and his wife, Jason and Catherine. And Jason and Catherine have a little girl. She's actually in kindergarten right now, so kind of a breath of fresh air around the farm, Kimberly is.
Sure.
We run a predominantly a large cow-calf operation, calving in May, June, and usually just background the calves and sell them in March for the most part, and also kind of have a what I call a nucleus herd of purebred cattle that we raise our own bulls with, primarily for our own use. We do sell a few of them if guys want, but just kind of a low cost way for us to raise our own bulls, Joe.
Yes, I'm of course very aware. As you know, we've had long conversations about this and how do I implement more of this in my system. But why don't you talk about, Darwin, kind of your feed strategy and what you generally do for winter feed? Is it dry hay, silage, grazing? I mean, I know the answer to this, but why don't you tell?
For the most part, Joe, we've kind of implemented a system where we have been basically grazing corn, standing corn, from usually October right through till March, middle of March, the end of March, depending on when it starts to break up. And this year we as you know, we added a little vetch to that mix, and we're fairly pleased with what we've seen. Not a great year for it. You know, our corn will generally consistently yield about 12 ton here in this area. And this year, I think crop insurance pegged us at about a little less than 4 ton to the acre. So it was, needless to say, we ended up baling a lot of straw from neighbors, and we've been feeding now for 6 weeks and not really enjoying that too much compared to just moving a reel every 3 or 4 days. So and I'll have to apologize, I don't know what you have here for pictures, Joe, coming up, but do you want to? Okay.
Darwin,
yeah.
I got Trav sitting here beside me to poke me when this goes on too long.
Okay. He's probably poking already. Anyway, this is, we grew 100 acres of full season cover for the first time this year. And just
Darwin, let me stop you. What did you know about plant diversity beforehand? What was your goals? Like, what did you want to get out of a full season cover crop?
What I guess primarily what I was seeing, Joe, was for me, I was seeing when we first started grazing corn, and this goes back about 20 years ago now, I thought I had the world by the tail. You know, we were, after 3 years, we would basically use no fertilizer on it. It was just a recycled system. And as that kind of went on and on, it just seems like the corn wasn't doing as well after a while. We were basically sowing corn on corn, and just was looking for different. Over the years, I looked for different things to sow with the corn and that, and then when I found out about this plant diversity stuff, and I just always keep in touch with what's going on. Just figured, you know, let's give her a go and see what happens. So economically as well, I guess would have been a big driver of it. Just to try something without fertilizer was very appealing.
So talk about the year you had. I mean, we were obviously on a tour. That's you and me standing side by side. It was dry, horrendously dry in your area. Like, it was July and there were lots of pastures that were being fed. I didn't think there was enough plant biomass to keep up with the amount of grasshoppers that were out there. It was, you guys were in need of a drink. I felt bad complaining about home because you guys had it a lot worse than we did.
Like this crop here, Joe, it was about the middle of July that you guys were out. We got 3 inches of rain from the time the snow melted until it finally rained at the end of August, when we got a good shot of rain. And 3 inches on our land is not the same as 3 inches in the Red River Valley. This is like class 4 land that probably has no business being cultivated in the first place, but that's what we're doing on some of it. So just for comparison's sake, this cover crop that we're standing in, we took it off for silage, and it did do about 4 ton an acre. By comparison, we had a quarter of barley, peas, oats, vetch, and clover sown that was fertilized. We usually on something like that will do about a 60-25, 0-5 blend kind of thing on it, and that went about 3 ton to the acre. So from a dollars per ton standpoint, the cover crop was definitely advantageous. The very good feed quality. It was about 14% protein and 71 TDN. So, good enough to basically background young calves or feed the lactating beef cows kind of thing.
Well, we actually, kind of a friend of ours at St. Claude, he just finished up a background calves feedlot trial. So we just fed full season cover crop. That was it. And his protein wasn't as high as yours, but yeah, he did just in the feedlot, just full season cover crop did just over 2 pounds a day. And I know you and I have had lots of conversations about profitability in the cattle market. And I think you would say those are pretty ideal results.
Yeah, very, very good, Joe.
Just before I go to the next slide, doesn't it look like you and I are about to open up for ZZ Top?
We could pull it off.
There is a lot of hair being flown around in that picture. Much less than now. So this is a video, Darwin. This is from the same field day we were on. This is one of your neighbors. It's going to be tough to talk over, but we can. Yeah, we'll talk about some feed quality and other things just after the video plays here. I think it'll be tough for you to chat over.
Yeah, like it was before.
And Darwin, that was tough to believe because it was tough to describe to people that weren't in Plumas early July 2021 what it was like there. But it was you walked through the field and or the ditch and you had to cover your scruff so grasshoppers weren't flying down there. Like it was dry and there were some tough conditions. And even I was pleasantly surprised with the cover crops that were there because we saw fields at home that missed the rain here, missed the rain there, that just looked nothing like that. So anyway,
this field here, Joe, is over at Collins there at Rolling Acres. Little better soil than ours, and you mentioned it when we were on the tour. It was just like I believe Colin, they sowed it quite a bit later than us, and that mix was, although you see a lot of oats and barley right there, it was predominantly more warm season species.
This one's the video was of Collins. This one's actually of yours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is your field that we're in. So this is the one.
Okay. Okay. Well, if this is our field, I just we actually sowed that field, Joe, on May 13th. And we're going to sow a lot more of this full season cover this year. I ain't going to be anywhere close to the field on May 13th this year. I'm waiting, and I think it's a May long weekend kind of crop to sow.
It's really tough because like my phone was ringing off the hook. Basically, you could have sowed every acre in April this year because there was no moisture and no rain in the forecast. But it really is tough. Like I'm the worst. I was putting mine in the ground. I know the benefits of the warm season species in the mix. I know that once that crop's established, it uses water more efficiently than any monocrop could produce. And still I'm out there punching it in the ground May 10th. And as predicted, we had a killing frost on like the 24th of May. So it really is, it's tough being patient, but yeah, you're right. Like generally we see, you know, there's a sweet spot between 20th of May and the 30th of May where, you know, we just see warm soil, things are shooting out of the ground, we get even emergence, and it's the diversity that we're after. Yeah, but I know it's a tough thing to wait if something's ready to go. It's just been drilled in our brain for the last however many years. For me, too long. Anyway, I'll tell a story about this. So on your field day, up to this point, I'd been in probably 24 full season cover crop fields, of which we didn't see virtually any sugar beets at all. And we're walking through your soil or your field, and there are sugar beets littered everywhere, and beautiful ones like this. And I still, to this day, I don't know the answer, Darwin, but why don't you talk about your regrowth, and I'll put a picture up here of kind of what it looked like.
Yeah, sure. And this is, it's not quite the true story here. This is actually what we did with the regrow, Joe, was it was a lot greener than that. And we actually we threw cow-calf pairs out there and had them clean it off. That would have been in like October, the first part of October, and then ran out of water at the dugout. So we had to move them and that. This photo here is actually taken, I think November the 5th. So you can see a lot of the cows had, you know, trampled some grass. That's why it's fairly brown and out there. But those were the sugar beets that were in the field November the 5th. And the cows obviously didn't really care for them to eat them. But we did take yearling heifers back up there and hauled them water for about 10 days. And after there wasn't a whole lot else out there, they will eat them eventually. They did eat them down to about a 4-inch, just basically 4-inch tuft there. That root, I would say, is probably about 10 or 11 inches long on that sugar beet there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, we honestly, Darwin. So I said to Trav, I'm like, you know, we're showing this picture, and we actually, so the blend we come out with this year doesn't have sugar beets in it because I experienced the exact same thing you did, which was, I mean, these are a forage soybean, but it was the last thing that the cows picked to eat. So, I mean, the way my brain works is, you know, we're feeding the biology when we're feeding a cow. We're not actually feeding the cow. We're feeding the biology in a rumen. So if that's the last thing she wants to eat and I can't come up with a purpose for it in the blend otherwise, other than being palatable cattle feed, you know, I axe it and we get something else that, you know, a cow wants to digest and cycle minerals. So, I mean, this was a really cool story and a really good picture. But yeah, we're not doing forage soybeans or forage sugar beets this year. We've gone to different brassicas, but I just thought it was a really cool story. And that's the end of yours, Darwin. So I'm going to mute you and pause you for a bit. We're going to come back very soon to question and answers, but it's just a perfect segue to my next slide, which is the biggest thing that I learned this year, which was how crazy different the regrowth has been both this year and what we saw in previous years. So this was light land in the southwestern part of Manitoba. So on the right was on the right was a full season cover crop, which virtually what you see there is sorghum Sudan grass, golden German millet, and cowpeas. And on the left is it was peas and oats, I believe. So virtually all warm seasons plant species that came back in regrowth. This was a saline patch that I sowed down on my own farm. We cut early, and it had the entire gamut of regrowth. It had a warm season, cool season, a little bit heavier soil. So that was interesting to see. And this was Darwin's from this year. So just to touch on how different, again, just for people that aren't familiar with full season cover crops, these are the identical blend. And seeing these different results based on different soil type and different weather conditions, this is where plant diversity is such a wonderful tool, where depending on your geography and your soil and the weather conditions, we can't predict this, you know, what the weather's going to do or how much rain we're going to get, but let's put the plant species in place so we can maximize growth potential with plant diversity. And just to hammer home the point, that is what it looked like in 2019, which was one of the wettest falls that we have ever had. It was virtually all ryegrass. And 2020, this is actually the same farm. Shout out to Darcy Stewart, who's on tonight. You're not getting a free hat, Stu, sorry, but thanks for the pictures. Same farm, same herd of cattle, not that far, geographically far apart. But look at the difference in the regrowth just from 19 and 20 versus 20. Oh, we got 2020 regrowth here, but it's actually 2021. Small minor hiccup, that's okay. But these are actually 2021 regrowth. This one, and this one. And then, yeah, we got 19 and 20. So guys, that is the end of the presentation. So I'm gonna ask you guys to unmute yourself. Let's see your pretty faces. Beauty. So I'm gonna start off the question and answer with Sam. Travis can organize some of these questions just while we're getting organized here. So Sam, I would say the number one question I get in my line of work is, I'm a grain farmer. I believe in soil health. I think it's a really good idea, but how do I appropriately, or how do I successfully implement plant diversity without the cows? So you are going down this path. You've put more thought into this than I have, because I have cows, or anyone on the panel. So just if you want to spitball, all good. If you got an answer queued up, even better.
I don't really have a planned answer, but like, just put more seeds in the ground. It's not that hard. It was surprising. Like, people can tell you're doing something different when they drive by, you know, and we pretty much wouldn't say we had all our cattle farmers nearby competing, but like, it wasn't hard to put in a full season cover and find someone who wanted it. You know, it's the easiest crop I've ever grown.
So Sam, I know we touched on it earlier, but just why don't you talk about, just really quickly, I know this is a bit of an in-depth answer, but we got a whole bunch of questions we got to get to here, but just kind of talk about how you foresee implementing plant diversity, not necessarily full season cover crops per se, but how you foresee implementing plant diversity on your grain farm going forward. And does that include cattle, or do you think you'll strictly just stick with plant diversity?
Yeah, well, I mean, on top of the full season covers, like, I plan on doing more this year, but other ways I want to start is doing like intercropping. So crops together, thinking like we did some and peas together. This year I'm planning to do oats and peas. And then I also, this fall, I seeded some fields into cover crops, and also like let my oats regrow, and then I seeded a cover crop into there. And so my plan for the next fall is to have the neighbor graze it. So that way I can fill that fifth tile of regenerative ag and include the cattle or the animals on the land.
Cool. So we got a few cattle questions. So this one will go to, I guess, Peter first, and then Darwin, if you want to talk about grazing days. So Peter, we're wondering how many grazing days or how many passes through the rotation you got. Just a rough estimate of how many total days you got. I can do the math for you if you want. I wrote down your number, but how many passes through you got? And then there's a question on a normal year, how many do you think you would get? And I can answer that too, because I've been grazing full season cover crops for a while. And Darwin, just once Peter's done, you can think about this, just how many grazing days you got in the fall grazing either cow-calf pairs or heifers. So Peter, let's start with you. Just talk about roughly how many passes through, your observation, and yeah, I can kind of come up with a number, how many grazing days you got here.
Well, we got, we came through the summer with about 2.5 passes. And had we had rain, we would have been, I don't know if we would have caught up to the grass, just with the acres we had. It's, I know we had some other, we grazed out a tree line over there. We did some other creative things just to give it a break, and there was some extra grass and just parts of the yard we grazed out. So I would say if we would have had moisture right through the summer like a normal year, we probably, yeah, we would have been full out way into November. And we only started June 12th. So on a normal year, you could probably be out there in our country. You could probably be out there probably the last days of May already and go into November.
Cool. And Darwin, in your system where you're taking, the first biomass growth off for winter forage, just talk about, I guess, the conditions. You guys were getting some rain in August, I think. Just, yeah, talk about, we don't have to get specifics, but roughly how many cows and how long they were on the land as far as kind of fall grazing.
Yeah, I can't really even honestly tell you, Joe, just off the top of my head. We got 6 inches of rain right at the end of August, and then it finally kind of started to go. But to be honest with you, by then the grasshoppers had pretty much ate the field right down to the dirt in a lot of places. So there wasn't a whole lot of growth on a lot of the field. I think that's probably one of the reasons why something like a sugar beet actually grew, because the grasshoppers obviously didn't eat it. Yeah. So but realistically, just a number off the top of my head, I could easily see a guy grazing a cow-calf pair to the acre for probably like a month on decent regrowth. Just ballparking it, like.
Yeah, and so in our experience, we used to do, Peter and I have had these conversations lots about continuous grazing versus leaving it rest, and honestly, in the current state of agriculture where there's a recipe for absolutely everything, it's scary to tell farms, hey, the neat thing is you get to use your eyes and your brain, and you get to manage these systems for the best use for you. I look forward to it now, where I like every year is different, and I actually get to go out and observe my cover crop, how many animals I have. Do I want to get them through there faster? Do I want to get them through there slower? What are my goals? First, start with what's my goal here? Is it land improvement no matter what? Is it I want as many grazing days as possible? Is it I want the animals fat and maybe it's a backgrounding situation. But what we've done is we've grazed the full season cover crop as quick as possible. And most years it's like what Peter said, where you just don't have enough animals. Once those plants hit symbiosis and there's moisture, like you saw with that picture with my dog Rusty, 6 days difference, we probably tripled the amount of biomass. It's just we have the right plant diversity in place, and 96% of a plant, I harp on this all the time, is sunlight and water. So, if we're getting sunlight, we're getting water, and we already have good plant diversity, it's like this, it's just ready to go. There's nothing holding it back. I don't give a damn what a soil test says. There's no mineral deficiencies you're going to see if you have good plant diversity, sunlight, and water. So yeah, and then so we get initial graze, we let it grow back. I'm less concerned with volunteers as most farms, but then we turn the cows back out late October, November, before we're going to wean and get those calves' digestive systems working. So very palatable feed they can consume and get used to consuming on their own with a digestible feed source right before we remove them from mom. So again, every farm's different. It's about what is your goals, and just, you know, have a goal set and implement it. So the next intelligent question we have, and I have a funny story. How much more is Joe going to drink tonight? Well, here's the thing. We had suggestions on on what you want to see this year, and like half of the respondents said I want Joe to drink less, and half the respondents said I want Joe to drink more. So I'm gonna appease everyone. I'm gonna drink the exact same as I always do every night. So this is just me. So we gotta, you know what? Why don't we talk about this, guys? Because it is a very common question. And we have a recommendation out there, but 2021 was horrendous as far as seeding conditions. And we were doing things that I don't normally do, which is like put a full season cover crop in the ground 1.5 inches because moisture's there. So Sam, why don't we start with you? What were conditions like at seeding, and kind of what your strategy was? Was it sink it to moisture? Was it wait for rain? And then we'll just go around the circle here, guys.
It was just too wet. It was just hard to seed this year. It's just couldn't even do it. No, yeah, it was like we seeded that cover crop a bit too early, I think. And yeah, I had forgot about that. Like we had a good killing frost. I don't know, the third week of May. But
I think it was probably the same one we got on the 24th.
Yeah, same one you all got. But it was hard and dry, and I seeded, I thought, deep enough, but I was just trying to get it on top of the moisture. And I was going to say that's the advantage with having like all those different plant species. Like some of them do well and better in different conditions. So if you put just oats in and the oats didn't do well, now you got nothing. So that's why that picture looks so good at the end of the year, because you got everything that is flourishing doing well. So yeah, it's kind of a challenge to seed at the right depth, I'd say, but you just got to kind of pick a happy medium.
Darwin?
As dry as we were, Joe, it was kind of funny, that field. We had nice moisture when we seeded it, probably because it was under about 3 feet of water last August. So there was plenty of moisture in the ground at seeding time. In fact, Owen was out and he was quite jealous of our moisture in that field when we seeded it. I don't know if it's a little different story, but like we did sow a lot of the warm season cover as well into sod, and it was dry when we did that, and just sowed along at about 4 miles an hour, just an inch deep, just kind of under that thatch layer, and put the seed there and prayed basically, and we did get a little rain to germinate it, and it's surprising what that warm season cover actually did in the end too. I think if the seed's there and it rains, it'll eventually come.
I couldn't agree more. Peter, I think we kind of gave away your seeding depth at the start with that picture Derek took, but you guys were going in deep as well.
Yes, they seeded it. We had like 2/10 of rain, just like a rain snow shower kind of 2 days before. And as soon as it was dry enough, they went in and single disc drilled it in. And then, yeah, it just kind of hung there till we had some rain, and and then we got hit by the frost as well. We lost some of the warm season, like some of the millets and that. We did lose them in the frost, but we had enough come through the ground. Well, you've seen, you were out, we had a good population there, so we weren't really starving right at the beginning, but it kind of tested it later.
Yeah, and I'll just say from my experience, like we always say, we find 3/4 of an inch to an inch when we're dealing with high plant diversity like this is ideal, because you know it's kind of a sweet spot where the grasses can come through, the vetch can come through, clovers, millet, stuff like that, but also you know we can get the peas in deep enough, good seed to soil contact, the cereals. But this year was just a different beast, and I had on my own farm I was going in 1.5 inches because you know it was the 10th of May, the moisture was down that far, and there wasn't a drop of rain in the forecast. And for the first time, the weatherman was right. It didn't rain in May at all. So I mean, not that I anticipated there would be some issues, and for the most part, I was right. I have never seen. I would say that the common denominator with the regrowth was that almost everyone's went in too deep because of the drought, and the ryegrass didn't come like it normally does. You know, usually go on coversandco.ca and check out our plant diversity guide. You can look at root systems of plants, above ground plant physiology, but we've got somebody sketched the root systems. I mean, you look at a root system of a ryegrass, it is just unbelievable. Like 10 times the amount of below ground biomass than above. It's like, it takes a long time to establish, but it should regrow with absolute vigor. And we just didn't see that this year. So I think in most cases, either it established and germinated and ran out of moisture, or it didn't germinate at all. Then it germinated later in the year and was stuck under a canopy, so we didn't see it. So yeah, there were definitely repercussions. I would say to anyone, there's people asking in the comment section about ideal blends, whether it's 3 species or 30 species. I mean, the key is plant diversity, where, you know, if we sow an Italian ryegrass, monocrop Italian ryegrass that deep, you know, we're probably going to end up with nothing. And if you ask me what regrows, I would say, you know, Italian ryegrass, hairy vetch, and clover. But I just showed you 3 examples where Darwin Gork in Plumas saw Italian ryegrass, you know, I forget what all Darwin had, but, you know, sugar beets. And Darcy Stewart in Clearwater had, you know, the entire spectrum of plants, because, you know, nothing fully hit vegetation, things were tillering, and the regrowth was different. So it's like, that's why we put our faith in Mother Nature and plant diversity, where it's like, we cannot predict the conditions that are going to happen this year. So put the right plants in place. So, you know, we have a goal, and the species are there, that if we get the precipitation, they're going to come. So we got a question, you guys, just we'll brush over it quick because it's not that interesting. We ask it all the time. You're not getting a hat, whoever asked this question, or a jacket. But what seeding tool did you use, Sam? I think you touched on yours, but Peter and Darwin, just to touch on quick, what seeding tool? Why don't I start this? You know, in a normal year, it doesn't necessarily matter. Good seed to soil contact, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and we see excellent results. But guys, just go around the circle, and we'll go Sam, Peter, Darwin. Just talk about your seeding tool.
Yeah, like I said, a Borgo Paralink with a 3/4 inch knife on 10-inch spacing. Nothing fancy.
Peter?
Used a John Deere 1696, I believe it is, single disc drill, and they went about 3/4 inch.
Darwin, I think you and I got the same drill.
Yeah, the old Cattleman special. They got a 88 Jamboard Go, 3/4 inch knives. And I seen one of the questions that popped up, Joe, was about pre-seed burn off and that. And just in our case, we actually sowed the crop, and then 4 or 5 days later, just went in and post-seeded, burned it off with Roundup.
Yeah, so that was actually the next question that Trav had written down for me here. Just to touch on your point, our drill is the exact same, but just good seed to soil contact. I don't give a damn if your drill's worth $10,000 or $500,000. 3/4 of an inch to an inch into moisture, good seed to soil contact. Honestly, that picture we showed of Peter's, where we've got lots of different plants, all even emergence, that's 50% of growing a good cover crop, is if we get even emergence, establish that sunlight hierarchy, and get those plants growing together so they can work in symbiosis. That is the key. I don't give a rat's ass how fancy your drill is. We just want even emergence. So maybe we'll go around about again. Darwin, you've answered yours. I guess I'll start. I am no fan of glyphosate by any way, shape, form. I have sat in on presentations, several of them, of really smart scientists, way smarter than I, talking about some of these harmful effects of glyphosate. It's the worst thing I do on my farm, but I still do it. And I have done pre-emerge glyphosate trials, a burn off versus not a burn off. And damn it, if I just don't see good results each time. So I'm still doing it. This year we didn't, because there was nothing growing. So I didn't have to worry about anything. But again, like we've talked about, sometimes patience is so important with sowing cover crops if we want true plant diversity. So by then, if we're into the 15th of May, likely there's some other plant population pressure. So Sam, why don't you go? And Peter, I'm not even sure if you're familiar, Peter, you guys are going through organic systems, so I can answer that. But Sam, why don't you talk about your kind of management strategies?
Yeah, we didn't burn it off. I'm trying to get away from excessive glyphosate use too. And also I just wanted to see how the cover crop would, if it would suppress what was there. Because I don't know, there's like probably thistles in that field, but no, we didn't burn it off, and maybe it could have, but yeah, just try not to spend any time in the sprayer if I don't have to.
That's my theory exactly. So we got another good question about residue. So you know what, this is actually a pretty good opportunity to talk about kind of plans for next year. Sam, I know we touched on it. Why don't you just touch on it quick? And I know you're growing some more full season this year. Just talk about kind of strategies you've thought about. Peter, you've got a very interesting story about what Hesplers are doing. And Darwin, I honestly don't know what you're doing with your full season ground next year. So this will be an interesting topic, guys. So we'll go in reverse. Darwin, why don't you go first on your full season ground? What's kind of your plan? And yeah, kind of going forward, what are you thinking?
On 100 acres, Joe, we're actually going to sow it right back into full season again this year, just to see what's going to go on. And then we had a lot of hay ground that's just completely petered out that we sprayed out and then sowed that warm season cover into in 21, and we're gonna sow there'll be about 550 acres altogether of full season cover right into that sod that was sprayed out and had warm season in it last year. So kind of looking forward to just that, because that's already been kind of bump started with this plant diversity stuff and just seeing what it's going to do.
I'm excited too. Peter, why don't you talk about what's going on with Hesplers? I know you're going back in with full season cover crop, but kind of exciting what kind of the prospect of what they're doing in the future.
I guess the field we grazed last year, that is going back into, they vertical tilled it in fall, gave it a light vertical till, and we're going back in with full season cover crop there as well. And then we're doing another field that was potatoes last year, and that's going into full season cover, and we're going to be grazing that as well. And we're going to be running the same program as this summer. With it seemed to work pretty good with setting up the different paddocks to try to get 3 days out of a system. And then over at our farm, we're going to put in 100 acres of full season cover. It's going to go into corn ground last year. And I plan on not doing a burn off because the corn we had very good weed kill coverage, and thinking if I don't have to spend the money, don't intend to spray it.
Well, it might be not if you want to pay the money, it might be if you can even get the herbicide, which has me very concerned.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've
I wanted
heard about
I wanted to quit glyphosate, but on my own will. Peter, just why don't you talk about some of the research farms that have put full season cover crop in the south of Winkler area? I know you and I toured, or you, Owen Kennedy, and I toured one of the research farms, but it's pretty exciting for me and the adaptation of cover crops. Why don't you just take a minute and talk about kind of what the research farms had going on close to you this year?
I guess we did first year we went in there and put in full season cover as well, and that's where we did the hay crop on. And I've been, the last few years we've been always growing ryegrass and oats, and it's kind of what we touched on before. Sometimes you can get that ryegrass going and you can't keep ahead of that stuff. And it's got to all line up. It's the number one ingredient is water. So yeah, we're going back in there again with full season cover again this year. So
nice. And Sam, why don't you touch on, you and I talked at length the other day about following a full season cover crop. And I know there was at least one question here about mycorrhizal fungi. So if you're comfortable talking about it, that's cool. Just kind of about strategies following, a stimulated biological system. And if you want, I can follow up, but just chatting about kind of what we chatted about on the phone the other day.
Like what I'll be doing with the full season covers.
For sure.
Yeah, like there's a potential to put it into a cash crop next year. And I mean, the backup plan is to just terminate it and put it into a regular cash crop. But I do have I have a quarter section of that was barley this year. I seeded a cover crop into it in fall that had red clover in it. And my plan is to seed that into the full season cover this year. And then, yeah, the full season covers that I did this past year, it's just kind of wait and see, just kind of decide at the seeding time what the best option is.
Well, most of the people that are on tonight, the webinar, were on when we had our intercropping webinar last year, when Ryan Boyd was talking about the potential with hairy vetch intercrops. And I know Darwin has a really good catch of hairy vetch I've been trying to buy sight unseen, but there's just some real potential with some of these specialty crops. And I mean, the market is going nowhere. And what I tell the farms is like, there is a new and establishing market in the cover crop world. The forage oats, the forage peas, the hairy vetch, golden German millet. These are all no-brainers as far as cover cropping. The governments are starting to fund them. These markets are developing. Fall rye, another excellent one. It's like, we do not have to we do not have to grow wheat and canola. Our soil will grow an amazing amount of things. And we've just lost the marketing aspect because we all check the price of the pit at the local Patterson or TLA, but some of these crops are well within our grasp and are a cleaner away or a little bit a couple more phone calls. But I mean, we're talking about profitability here and the potential for profitability in an emerging market. I mean, I'm pretty sure the corn market and the wheat market and the canola market must be the most studied markets in the world. Well, we can still hit those markets, but why don't we grow crops that have the potential both to hit the cover crop market and worst case scenario, we drop it in a pit. But as farms, when I started the presentation, I showed that graph, 2% return for every dollar invested since 1985. we have to start thinking differently. Otherwise, you know, the same thing is going to take place. Nothing changes if everyone thinks it's business as usual. Sorry, Trav's giving me some more questions. And just to touch on that, an interesting perspective from our research at following a full season cover crop. If anyone's familiar with mycorrhizal fungi, what we see the best results, and we have trialed so many different crops following a full season cover crop, it seems as though the mycorrhizal dependent plants, so the oats, the corn, I haven't tried flax, but I was telling Sam on the phone the other day, if I had the balls to grow flax, I think it would be a winner after a full season cover crop, because we have a stimulated biological soil, we have residual mycorrhizal fungi, and a ready to go hyphae network to grow and stimulate next year's crop. So if you're wondering what to grow after a full season cover crop, that's our best bet, is these mycorrhizal dependent plants. Our best bet has been oats. We've grown some excellent corn. I mean, at the very least, corn trials. But yeah, I would say I would stick with that theme. And if somebody's good at growing flax after a full season cover crop, I bet would be really good. Okay.
Are you doing like a pre-seed burn when you're doing like an oats crop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on this idea because we got to get rolling here. Anton, you're gonna get the jacket because it's Valentine's Day, and Anton says, moving forward, could your fiance host the webinar? I'm confident she's much better looking, may increase your viewer numbers. I believe you, and I think that's likely true. So you're getting a jacket. Drop your post or your PO box in the chat, or you have my number, you can send it to me as well. But guys, I want to talk 10 minutes on an idea that was brought up to me this morning about the crazy world we live in. I don't have any fertilizer booked. I don't have any seed booked. The idea was proposed to me. Why don't you sow your whole farm to full season cover crop or some variation of it? Of course, I would get creative with the timing and the context. And background calves, it's looking like the cattle market is going to be very strong come next fall. If I can gain 300 pounds of beef an acre and sell it at £2 an acre, or $2 per pound, while I'm working with $600 an acre, my only costs are my land and my cover crop seed, and my soil is absolutely set up for my ultimate goal, which is to totally remove my dependency on synthetic inputs. So Darwin, you and I have had conversations at length about profitability in the cattle market. I'm curious your thoughts on this idea.
My thoughts on the idea, Joe, are Connor and I have been discussing that for about a week now, and I would totally go for it. Just plain and simple. It's
well, I mean, I can't believe I own a damn cover crop seed company of which full season cover is our best seller. And I've done all the numbers. I've done all the numbers beforehand, but I've never really related it back to our system, which is, you know, we grow grain and try and implement the cattle where we can. But I know it seems crazy to think.
What are you scared of?
What are my neighbors going to think? Just kidding. But Peter, the reason why I ask you your numbers about your heifers is give us a ballpark of what you think your heifers gained as far, you know, throughout the season. And I've got a pretty good idea as well. There's a guy in the webinar tonight who's done this exact same thing. At this point, other than my father, you're going to almost have to talk me out of the idea. But Peter, what did you see as far as gain on your heifers? Do you estimate? And maybe we'll just do a quick mathematical breakdown as far as profitability right here.
Well, I think we would have been over that 2 pounds, closer to 2.5 pounds a day.
So, I mean, that 2.5 pounds a day, based on the numbers that you had, would achieve the that goal of 300 pounds of beef per acre, or yeah, 300 pounds of beef per acre. And the hope is, I mean, Darwin's probably one of the, the most thoughtful cattle marketers I have ever spoken to. And I bet you, Darwin, there seems to be, I mean, cattle farms got to be the most irrational optimists as far as market optimism of any industry in the entire world. But it seems like there's some real optimism in the cattle world going into spring and fall, both with the herd size numbers down and I don't know the price of beef in store, but it seems like, well, it seems like the needle is starting to point that direction. I don't know what you feel on the subject, Darwin.
I think that, yeah, you're exactly right, Joe. The magic pill is going to be, is there going to be enough rain to just kind of sustain some pasture and hay and stuff this year and get things going in that direction again? Have you ever, Joe, my biggest, I guess the thing that I would have the most trouble getting around this is I know we personally, we wouldn't have the ability to keep this crop grazed down. Have you ever spoken with anyone that grazes this stuff as it's mature in like August, September, October kind of thing?
It has happened. I mean, we had to do it this year. We did not, when it started to rain, we did not have enough animals. Basically what I tell farms, Darwin, is if the crop starts to get ahead of you, and Peter, you and I had lots of these conversations over the summer, if you don't have enough animals, the best thing to do is run them over quick. Because once that crop hits reproduction, starts producing seeds, we stop feeding that biology, right? And really that's the whole goal, like that we're trying to mimic a system that happened here 30,000 years before, you know, created the very soil beneath everyone here tonight's feet, which is a plant grows up, feeds the soil, it hits reproduction, it starts capturing that energy and putting it towards plants. So the role of the bison was they just moved along and kept trimming that biomass back into vegetation to keep feeding that system. So what we say is if you don't have enough animals there, or the crop's getting ahead of you, make the paddocks bigger and start running them over faster. And the goal is just to keep setting that crop back, keep it out of reproduction, keep it in vegetation, and we keep that cycle going. But with that being said, our crop, it was a combination of things. It grew too quick. We didn't have enough numbers. And then the drought, it just got so hot and so dry that the crop kind of got ahead of us. But with that being said, plant diversity rules all, and we've got, you know, 4 or 5 indeterminate species that no matter the conditions, as long as there's precipitation there or some moisture, is going to keep feeding that system. So although not ideal, we've got the plants that are going to stay vegetative and basically keep an energy flow into the soil. And when I say energy flow, turning atmospheric carbon into liquid carbon to feed that biology. So Sam, I'm curious, as a grain farm, what do you think of this crazy idea?
Well, it's totally crazy.
Do you not remember what Peter said about how peaceful it is reeling wire up? It's actually the best way to spend time.
Yeah, well, my worry is if I hang out with you guys, this regenerative group any longer, I'm going to be a cattle guy. So,
I wouldn't wish that on you.
I mean, the numbers pencil out because like the amount of hay you can get, just the hay alone, like can be a lot better than a failed cash crop. And like plants grow like all the time. So if you're not dependent on harvesting the seed for profit, you're harvesting the plant. And then you have the benefits in the soil as well. Like having a field green from like the start of the season to the very end is gotta be so much more beneficial than how long is a barley crop green, you know?
Well, how long is it in vegetation for is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
40 days?
Yeah, a little more than a month.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So just I mean, to touch on your point, Darwin, I think it would be impossible to hit the right numbers and hit the, to hit it exactly right, that you're going to buy this many feeders and put them on this many acres and have the crop planned perfectly. So, I mean, let's do some simple math based on the current price of feed. Peter in a drought, of course, Peter's got clay, but did 5,700 pounds an acre of high quality feed. That should be worth 10 cents a pound, right? So if my crop gets too far ahead of me and it's a good quality crop, I can cut the thing. Hopefully I can get 8 to 10 cents a pound, and we're still, without regrazing or a second cut, we're still at over $500 an acre. And back before canola was $25 a bushel, $200 or $300 an acre with very little risk was a really good crop, So I'm not sure where I was going with that. I'm talking myself into it in real time in front of everyone.
I was just wondering, Joe, like a guy like Gabe Brown that grazes these, what Gabe calls full season covers through the winter. That was kind of where I was going. Like, I actually didn't realize that once, like to me, the plants are still growing, even though they're kind of mature, but you're saying that the biology kind of stops as the plants more or less mature. So maybe a guy could do that with more of the warm season stuff and graze it in September, October, November kind of thing.
Well, and that's for sure. It would have to be some combination, because I mean, as Peter found out, it's a tough thing to manage. And again, that excites me, having to use this instead of cutting a check, for somebody else to to take profit off the farm. But yeah, it would have to be some combination of, a full season cover crop grazed early, so we had biomass now, combined with, warm season cover crops, putting the warm season species in midsummer context, so very important. And then managing our regrowth. I mean, the dream would be we didn't have enough animals and we have lots of biomass and we're cycling minerals. I mean, I also have a cow herd that would appreciate that all winter long if we weren't going to get the snowfall. So yeah, it will be interesting. And fortunately, I now manage the farm and I just have to listen to my old man. I mean, the ideas get implemented, but he barks at me still. So, I mean, we'll really see where this is going to settle out, but it doesn't excite me taking out a $200,000 or $300,000 operating loan. And to lots of people on the call, that sounds like pennies. But I got 1,000 acres and our current price on full season cover crop is $77. Geez, I don't mind the prospect of spending $77,000 on cover crop seed, buying animals, price insuring them, and seeing what happens. It's very low risk, and at the very, very least, I know that the benefit that that's going to have to my soil, because we've tested this. Keith Friend, so just to touch on your question, did you add any fertilizer to the oats after the full season? We don't flaunt this trial enough, but we did a trial with General Mills and the University of Manitoba this year, trialing exactly this. So 3 farms across Manitoba, different spots in Manitoba, grazed full season cover crop, and then we just did fertilizer trials. So off the hop, we used no phosphorus at all. We don't see a response after a full season cover crop with phosphorus. Maybe we need to do more trials, but I think there's some pretty good science behind that. And then we were just seeing the economic threshold was at 50% of nitrogen fertilizer rates. And then again, this is in 2021, where the biggest limiting factor wasn't nitrogen, it was water. So, the results were kind of flawed, but I mean, at 50% nitrogen and at 0 nitrogen, we weren't seeing drastic difference in results. And a year where nitrogen's $1.20 or $1.30 a pound, that is going to be a substantial difference. And so there's some real potential here for sure. Guys, we are now at almost 2 hours. No, are we over? No, we're almost 2 hours. We said for sure it was going to be an hour and a half long max and 2 hours max. So just before I let you go, Anyone have any final thoughts as far as full season cover crop that you didn't get to talk about, or that the people that are watching, there's still lots of people on here. You got any advice or information? Yeah, now's your chance. And I'm actually gonna pick you out so Sam, you start, and then Peter, and then Darwin. Just kind of final thoughts as far as something you didn't get to or whatever, but take her away. You got a minute each.
I'd say like it's not hard to implement the soil health principles, and the full season cover for a grain farmer is just kind of like, we'll see how it goes. But like, just do it. Like, do it and try it and see how it goes. Because I don't think we'll see what happens this year with it too. But I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong. Yeah, can't just keep going down the same path that like that one of those first slides you showed. Like, you got to do something different. That, in my opinion.
Peter, final thoughts?
I guess I'm looking forward to this spring. We've got lots of snow cover here. We're pushing snow every other day, it seems like. It seemed to be getting 2 Alberta clippers a week. And no, I think this summer looks like we should have some ideal conditions. And I'll just say, when we were grazing, and I know you were telling me heifers works the best, or young stock for grazing. They kind of stick in a group, and that's one thing we noticed. They just move along kind of like a vacuum cleaner, and just they it didn't seem like they had a preference to anything. They just moved along and just cleaned her up. So looking forward to doing it again this summer.
Nice. Darwin, I would say you get the final word, but I'm going to get the final word.
I would say, just from a soil health and water infiltration perspective, Joe, it fascinates me. But on a year like this, a cattle guy growing feed, to me, this full season cover crop is just an absolute no-brainer. The seed is going to be less than fertilizer alone to sow an average silage crop, and like in a drought year, we grew more tons of feed with our full season than we did with our, like I say, our oat, barley, pea mixed fertilized. So just from if you're not worried about soil health and water infiltration and all the benefits of that, just put a calculator to it and go and get some full season cover crop seed. It just makes sense.
Cool. And I guess my final thoughts, I got to give 2 hats away. Stephanie Manning, talk to your department. I would love to be a professor. I'm not going to follow regular hours, of course. You're probably going to have to come to my house, honestly, now that I think about it. So you're going to get a hat. So drop your PO box in the chat. And I think who asked the oat question? Keith, someone. Yeah, I think Keith asked the question about fertilizer. So yeah, drop it in. We'll send you guys a hat. And the very last thing is, I'm hearing the watershed districts have announced their new cover crop programs for 2022. So there is a whole bunch of money available that farms need to take advantage of. Absolutely. This is becoming more adapted, and the early adapters should be rewarded. I feel that wholeheartedly. So talk to your local watershed. There is some very, very good programs out there. There are some watershed districts that see the writing on the wall here, see the water infiltration and the harm that synthetic fertilizers are having on these watersheds. So yeah, reach out to your local watershed if you have any interest. Go to our website. Guys, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. What an excellent webinar. Again, it was our best attended one yet. Thanks so much.